Welcome to Cloud on Air, live webinars from Google Cloud. We are hosting webinars daily. You're watching Grow with Google Cloud. My name is LJ Erwin, and today we will be doing a virtual partner talk with Y Combinator. Joining me is Eric Migicovsky. You can ask questions anytime on the platform, and we have Googlers on standby to answer them. So let's get started. So Eric is a partner at Y Combinator. He's also a founder of Pebble, which was launched in 2011. Eric, what else should we know and learn about you for this conversation today?
Well, I joined YC about 2.5 years ago, and I've had the pleasure of helping now over 200 companies go through the program.
Awesome. And we've also been following Startup School, which is Y Combinator's online program to teach insights and lessons about building and growing and scaling a startup. And over the past 4 weeks, we've talked a number of subjects for us from Startup School, from how to evaluate startup ideas, to how to plan an MVP, to 9 business models and metrics that investors want to see. So we're going to be covering those topics today. In fact, we have a number of questions from our audience around those weeks that we'll be discussing. Cool? So we have a short amount of time today, so let's just jump right in. Cool?
Let's do it.
First question is really around this whole idea and the lesson around how to evaluate startup ideas. And so Kevin Hale, one of the YC partners who's leading Startup School, mentioned that when pitching an idea to a startup, about a startup, they should structure it in the form of a problem, a solution, and an insight. From your perspective, which is the most important component that a founder must nail more than anything else, and why?
I think one of the key components for starting a company is attacking a problem. There are many different ways that you can build a company, but the most reliable, kind of consistent methods that people can use is to solve a problem that people have, build a solution, and get it into their hands. That's why, YC, it's on the t-shirt, build something people want. Again, there's many kind of edge cases and startups that don't exactly follow that.
Yeah.
But if you're starting out and you don't have a clear problem, either that you want to solve for yourself or that you want to solve for other people, it's going to be harder. So I really think that starting with the problem is the best way to think about building a startup.
Yeah, but everybody has problems. I want burritos on demand or whatever, drones flying pizza around the world. How do I know that the problem is really a problem that's useful to solve?
Probably the best way to do it is to solve a problem that you have in your daily life. The reason why we say that, solve a problem for yourself, because that gives you the ability to know when you've actually solved it. If you're building something, if you're a student at a university and you're building something to help keep track of your notes during class, or you're writing software that helps people collaborate on group projects, you know when you're done, because you yourself are that exact user. That's why when we say start with a problem, it's usually best to start with a problem that you yourself have. If you're, say, a manager at a company and you've created, a new component that you think your company might actually use, that's great. It's much harder when you start thinking about problems that you yourself haven't encountered. It's not impossible, but the way that you get to the problem there is you actually just go and talk to people. Hopefully before you've actually tried to build the thing that you're trying to make. Because you may discover that the people that you think have the problem, maybe it's not that acute. You were talking about a few things earlier. The problems that I love to solve, or the ones that I love to see startups solve, are ones that people encounter on a regular basis. I learned this. I learned this kind of analogy maybe 8 years ago. It was people who build, say, sporting equipment. If you're building, rock climbing gear or something like that. Most of the people that use it probably don't go rock climbing every single day. And so you're building a product that they will take out of the closet or take out of the shelf maybe once a month or once every couple months. And so you only get the chance to see if you're solving the problem. You only get the chance to see if you're solving the problem for them whenever they pull it out of the closet and drive off and go to the mountain or whatever. Whereas if you're building something that building something to solve a problem that people encounter on a daily basis, you get that many more chances to see if your product solves that solution for them.
Got it. And if I'm a very creative person, I see a lot of problems that need to be solved. There's a lot of problems in the world that need to be solved. is there a way for me to kind of like figure out which ones I should tackle versus which ones I should probably just keep on the backlog?
I think the first thing that the best founders that I know do is they go out and talk to people that have that problem. Then they keep as close track. They basically take notes on every single interaction that they have with people with that problem. And they begin to identify three things. One is, how acute is that problem? Like, do they feel the pain? Is it a monetary pain? Is it a time pain? Is it something else? The second one is, how frequently do they encounter that problem? Okay. And they literally record, like, this person encounters this problem once a week, once a month, once every hour. And the third thing that they track is, how much does this person spend trying to solve this problem today?
Yeah.
And usually, like, this is a really critical question to ask as you're doing user interviews, because you want to solve a problem. You want to try to build a solution to a problem that the person is actually trying to solve.
Right.
If they just have it and it's like sitting out in the back of their mind and it's annoying, but it hasn't risen to the level at which they're actively trying to find a solution, it's possible that that problem is not actually as important to them as you think.
Right.
So I track those three things: severity of problem, frequency, and have they actually tried to solve it in the past?
Got it. Well, let's go into week 2 because we talk about how to talk to users and what you should talk to them about. So this is the one you covered, actually. So you mentioned that the best founders keep and maintain a direct connection with their users and they don't outsource that function. If a founder is both building and selling the startup at the same time, roughly what percentage of the time should they be spending directly with their users?
This is a tough one because some of the best founders, they're hackers. They're the people that are actively building the software, the hardware, or the product that they're going to then go and sell or get out into the world. The best founders I know, they, in terms of like time, it's hard to say because, you know, the hacking and the actual developing of it usually is like, you know, you may work on that from 4 p.m. till 4 a.m. and then you wake up and you're back to talking to users.
Well, what about when you were at Pebble? Like, what percentage of time were you focused on like building the watch?
We didn't talk to users enough. That's one of the things that I forget the most. Like,
lessons learned.
The lesson that I learned was that we took these like 8-month periods where we would go, we would say, like, we'd have a focused time of like, we'd go to conferences, we'd talk to users, we'd gather feedback, and then we'd basically go back to the lab. And we'd just like build and hack. And unfortunately, we didn't talk to users for like large periods of time because we thought like we were building hardware. Okay. So, you know, we had to go to factories and we had to negotiate with suppliers. And we said, oh, you know, this is going to take a long time. Maybe let's just like push off the talking to users thing until we're at the next development or at the next like milestone, like beta prototype. That was wrong. What we should have done was get into a habit of continuously, like every week, talking to users, because what happened to us was we raised a bit of money after YC, maybe $200,000, $300,000, which seemed like a lot, but for a hardware company, it didn't turn out to be kind of enough. And we used that money to build the next kind of batch of our early watches. This is even before Pebble. And the problem was that took us much longer than expected. We thought we would build the next maybe 1,000 watches in 3 months. It ended up taking 9 months. And during that period of time, we were getting no feedback. Like, I wasn't actively talking to customers. I had a long list of them. I had maybe 2,000 people on a waiting list.
Yeah. But what would you talk to them about it? You're still in like build and tinker mode.
But here's the problem. So by not talking to them, I didn't realize that people were shifting away from BlackBerry, which was the first phone that we supported. And they were shifting to Android and iOS. And we were still building a BlackBerry watch. And so we weren't getting that continuous feedback. And if we had, I would have been like emailing people and realizing like that person just switched from a BlackBerry to an iPhone. And when we actually went and produced the first watches, we didn't sell out. We didn't even sell like that 2,000 person list that I thought was like super excited.
Yeah,
I just didn't know they were gone. They had moved on, and so we ended up like, having wait, like we were overstocked.
Yeah.
And so the lesson that I learned from that process was validate your assumptions. If you think that something is true about your company, then I would be regularly checking in with your customers to make sure that they're still true.
Yeah.
Or else you may be, like in our case, working on a 9-month path to like basically a brick wall.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
And we eventually got the message, and
Yeah.
we got into the habit of talking to our users on a weekly basis. When we did our Kickstarter, we had updates that came out every 2 weeks. They would be blasted out to all 90,000 people. We would get a lot of feedback. We would get a lot of emails,
Positive, negative.
a lot of tweets, and that was great. That
Yeah.
felt like it would be impossible for us to make as big a mistake as we made before,
Yeah.
because we were constantly in communication with our customers.
Yeah. So at a minimum, even if you're a hardware startup,
Totally.
at least talk to your users
Yeah,
at least once a week.
I mean, once a month would kind of be at the longest.
Yeah.
And the best way is to talk to users. You can try surveys, like that sometimes helps if you just send a survey out to all your users. But I actually found that the best way to talk to them is one-on-one.
Really?
So it's to nurture either over the phone or over email. One of the things that startups can do, and it's kind of cool, it's like a hack that only startups can use, is you're the CEO, you're the founder. You can actually email any of your users and think about it from the perspective of like a user. Imagine if you're using the software and you're like really into it, and you downloaded this app, and then out of the blue, the founder of the company emails you.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's up, LJ? What do you think? What do you think of this product? Like, give me some feedback. You're going to do it, right?
Yeah,
because
for sure.
The founders of large companies.
Eric emails me about anything, I'm definitely responding to that.
But it's like the secret trick that startups can use, because you have the time, you have the energy, and you can like forge these one-on-one direct connections with customers in a way that big companies, they just can't do it anymore.
Yeah. And I love Ilya's idea about having like a Slack channel, and then you have your customers in specific channels.
Yeah.
With the beta.
Just ping them and be like, hey.
And it's like almost like, it's not even like you're reaching out, it's like you're constantly connected to them.
Yeah. One of the things that we did with Pebble was every time we released a new SDK, we would actually release it to a group of 100 developers that we had under NDA that were kind of like the first group. And we called them the NDA developers. And anytime anyone ever had a question, we'd be like, oh, we should just ask the developers. Like, why don't we just ask them? Instead of like guessing or trying to imagine what the problems would be, just said like, let's try it out. Let's just send them the software and see what they think.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, moving on to another portion of your talk was about the mom test. I love the mom test. If you haven't bought the book, buy the book. The mom test is on Amazon. It's amazing. You mentioned that there are 3 common errors founders make when doing user interviews, and that founders should focus the conversation on the user's life, not their product.
Yeah.
The user's problems, not hypotheticals, and listen, don't talk. While doing this, how do you know, like when you're doing the user interview, how do you know when you've struck gold and what you're hearing validates your thesis or invalidates your thesis? But what are some of the signals that you should be watching out for?
So one of the things that the way that I know that a user interview is going well is when I hit a problem and it's just vibrating in the other person's head. They're like, wow, like no one's ever talked to me about this part of my life, and I have all these things to say. Like, here are the problem, here are the like aspects of the problem that I encounter. Here are the things that I tried. Remember those 3 questions that I was talking about earlier? The frequency, the severity, like when they start telling you that unprompted, if you don't have to ask like, hey, what other solutions have you tried? Or what other things have you used to try to solve this problem? If they're just telling you them, then you know that's definitely a problem. That's painful for them.
Yeah, you struck a nerve.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like to what you were saying around like letting them talk, that's the key. I think founders, we're very proud of what we worked on. Obviously we've thought about it a lot. We spent a lot of time building, and we kind of want to tell people about it, right? That's the natural like pitch mode, right?
I got this thing.
You've met a fair number of founders. I'm sure you've encountered ones that just come up and so when you're doing user interviews, you have to almost like turn off that part of your brain that specifically is the founder, like that's us. Yeah. And you have to dial that down a little bit so that you can actually hear from the person that you're interviewing, like what's happening in their life before you jump in and you start like talking about your solution. But that's totally cool. Like as soon as you've gotten the information that you need, like about answers to those 3 questions, then you can try to weave in your solution and say like, okay, like you've tried these 3 things. Well, we built this, and then you can basically try to get them on board your your track.
Yeah. And in terms of setup, do you have like any specific tools you like to use when you're doing a user interview to like record the conversation?
I mean, I try to do it in person if you can. It's
Okay.
not always possible. If you do it in person, ask the person if you can just like put your phone down and record it, because they may say things that you don't even like really recognize when you're going, in the heat of the conversation, and you'll want to check back in after. If you're spending 15, 20 minutes with a user, you could definitely afford, like at the end of the day, to transcribe that 20-minute conversation, put it in like, a Google Doc or something like that, so you can search it, and then you can come back to it and say like, what did LJ say about this particular thing that was going on?
Yeah, there's an amazing app that I love to use when I do conversations. It's called Otter. It just records the conversation and transcribes it at the same time, and then I can export that out to Google Docs and then share it with my team, and then our team is now looking at the conversation as opposed to just me trying to scribble down notes and be engaged at the same time.
And then you can reference it and be like, I'm not just making this up. This actually happened. Like, I actually got into this groove with this person.
Right. Absolutely. Kind of like the groove we're in right now. I love it.
Talking to users.
I know. So you mentioned some of the power questions. Where can founders find more power questions to like ask during user interviews?
There's no silver bullets here.
Yeah.
You really just have to practice. The key, for me at least, was getting out there. And it feels kind of annoying sometimes because, first of all, like you were talking about before, it's out of, like, if you're a hacker, if you're the person who's coding, it feels a little bit outside of your wheelhouse. It feels like, you're exercising a different muscle. But it comes with practice. And I would just dive in. I would, like, if I haven't done some recently, I would just, like, get a list of 10 people and go out and do the talks, because you'll learn the questions that you need to ask for that particular line of questioning as you do it. Like, you won't be able to guess them ahead of time because they might not be the right questions.
Yeah.
But as you go through the first interview or the second interview, you'll start like learning what questions are the ones that evoke the right answer.
Exactly. So I know for your list, you might have some people that some acquaintances and some friends who might just they'll give you the best version of what you want to hear. How do you find individuals that you just don't know, who have no idea what you're building?
But that's the key to this book. So I'll make another recommendation for this book, The Mom Test, because what Rob, the author and another YC founder as well, what he gets into in this book is how do you take people who are more likely to just give you the answers that you want to hear, like your mom, who just support you 100%.
Yeah.
And how do you use people? How do you use conversations with people like that to get actionable information?
Right.
And you can do it. You don't have to go to completely new people just to get that. You can actually talk to your friends, to your family, to your teachers, to your like students that are at your university. You can get great answers from even people who are biased to like you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good deal. All right. Let's go to week 2, where we start talking about MVP, most valuable player. Minimum viable product. All right. So I think Michael Siebel covered this one, CEO of Y Combinator and a partner. How do you know when a founder is taking too long to launch their MVP? Like, what are some of the signals? You're just holding on to your baby. You don't want to toss it out of the nest.
This is something that almost everyone is guilty of. Everyone takes too long. And the reason why is the world is full of great products. Like, we use fantastic products every day. And we always benchmark ourselves against this. This is something that hardware companies do way too often. With a certain company down the road in Cupertino, they compare what they're building to like the shiniest thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, you just have to break out of that mindset. It's something that, again, everyone is guilty of. The mindset that I like to get into, this is like my trick for kind of flipping it around. If you're building something that solves a problem, then every second that you do not launch your solution to that problem, you are actively hurting people who have that problem.
Yeah.
And so I like to think about it, it's like, my solution's not perfect by far. But if I've done my job and I've talked to users and I understand that they have a particular problem, that then even the simplest solution to that problem is going to help them.
Right.
It's going to be like useful, it's going to, help them either, if it's a daily problem, it's going to help them like every single day.
Yeah.
And so that's the mindset shift for me. It's like, even if it's not perfect, it's still solving a problem that people have. And and they deserve to have a solution. Like, why should I be the one taking it away from them? So it's like a little shift.
Yeah, and then also when you have the MVP, like the quality of feedback that you get is
it's tremendous.
Yeah,
like all of that talking to users that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Before the product, it's just hypothetical. Before you introduce the product to them, it's a hypothetical. As soon as they're actually using it and giving you feedback, then it's real. It's tactical. Like they tell you, here's the problem that I had. Oh, it would be really cool if you solved it. Deliver them the app, deliver them the hardware, and they're like, oh yeah, this really solves my problem. Or no, actually, like I would love to use it, but I'm not using it every day. And then you ask them questions like, why aren't you using it every day? Like, what are the things holding you back? And they can give you real advice on how to improve that. If you're just like perpetually talking about this hypothetical thing that you're working on, then you don't really know if you're doing a good job. You don't know if you're actually solving that problem. You may think so. Going back to like that 9 months that I spent kind of off in the like if I had like truly like finished up the first watch and just like given it to someone, I would have discovered that like maybe and given it to I would have discovered that maybe they're switching. Maybe they're switching from BlackBerry to iOS, and like they can't actually continue to use that first product that they made because they just don't have the will.
It's so painful.
Yeah.
To deliver the product before you know it's ready.
Yeah.
But it does accelerate learning.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Got it. What's the balance between receiving user feedback and incorporating feature updates into your MVP?
It's a tough one. The trap that people could fall into, like the flip side of you should definitely launch, you should definitely get it out to early users. The flip side is sometimes you may need to fire your users.
Okay.
And
fire your users.
It sounds weird.
How do you do that? Please tell me.
Oh, I had a company go through this just last week, an enterprise company. They had signed these LOIs. They had been working with them for 2 years or a year, and they were getting ready to roll it out. But what they had realized, they had 3 customers for this enterprise hardware, actually. They had 3 customers lined up, 3 in 3 different domains, 3 different businesses. And what they realized after they had rolled out the first 2 is that one of the applications just would not work. There was no way that they were going to be able to hit the margins and get the sales that they needed to get. And their third customer was a better customer. It was in the right angle. Mm-hmm. And so what they did was they had to decide to turn off one of the customers. They had to go to them and say like,
how do you do
even
that?
though we've been working with you for a year, unfortunately, we just can't continue the contract. And they explained why. And it sucks. It's unfortunately, it's as hard as firing, an employee that works with you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's going to be better for both because you will never be able to, if you know that you're not a great solution for them, it's just more painful. It's going to be more painful down the road when they have it all implemented and they realize that it just sucks.
Yeah.
And for you, that could actually kill your company. Sometimes, like if you're building the right product, but for the wrong customer, you may like get that feedback, like you were asking, like the feedback that customer is getting. It may steer you in the direction that ends up like killing your company, and that's super hard. I mean, being a founder is not easy. So this is just one of the many things that founders have to encounter. But at some point, if you feel like the customer's not right, listen to your gut because you're probably right, and you may need to not actually be talking to that customer anymore.
Good point. Let's go to the second lesson. The lesson is around how to set KPIs and goals. I believe Adora, a YC partner, Adora, led this one. She talks about this concept of primary and secondary metrics. Are primary and secondary metrics helpful pre-MVP? And if so, how?
Yeah. Probably not pre-MVP. I think the reason why YC and I think at General Startup School and everything stresses getting to the point of having that minimum viable product is because that's like a night and day difference in terms of the company. In terms of like phases of startups, you have idea, MVP, and then product market fit. And the mission of every startup is to get to product market fit. Okay. But you can't do that until you hit this MVP stage. Like you need to get to that as soon as possible. Because once you get to an MVP, then as you're iterating, as you're twisting, changing, tuning your idea, the next milestone is product market fit.
Yep.
But you can't jump. You can't go from like idea to that. So in terms of like KPIs, like the biggest one is just a binary, like have you put this in the hands of customers yet?
Yeah.
So I would just like spend all my time and effort trying to get there.
Yeah, cool. Let's talk a bit about analytics. Everyone loves analytics. So there's no doubt that analytics are important for any company, let alone a startup. What should a founder do if the analytics just aren't there? Like they're either a deep tech company or they're moonshot. Like what should they do in that situation?
What should they track?
Yeah, what should they track?
So the best companies, even if they're hard tech, even if they're building something that may take months to get to kind of that MVP state, best companies work on a 2-week time frame.
Okay.
They work on a sprint, just like software engineers, just like people who can ship their code on a regular basis. And the reason why is you'll start getting these feedback loops. Maybe not with customers or end customers, but you'll start getting feedback loops within your team. Okay. You'll say like, hey, this process or this like this early milestone that we have to hit, we're delayed. We're pushing this back constantly. And if you have milestones or dates that are like 2 months ahead, it's so easy to just push those back constantly. But if you set 2-week goals for yourself, if you say, I want to go to this conference, or I want to find out if this customer is interested, and you say, I just have 2 weeks to do this, you will know really quickly whether the process that you are doing or trying to do to solve that 2-week problem worked or not within 2 weeks.
Right.
But if it's like 8 weeks, it's so easy to get into this like habit of saying, we don't have the answer yet, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because I think it's going to work in 8 weeks.
Yeah. So shorten that time
So
frame.
choose like things that you know can be accomplished within just a 2-week time frame.
Okay.
And even if it's building towards like a multi-year goal,
Yeah.
like it may be 2 years, right?
Yeah.
We've got some companies that have gone through YC, like Boom Aerospace. They're building a supersonic jet.
Yeah.
Like that's not going to be done in 2 weeks.
I hope not.
Or sorry, the product's not going to be like MVP in a year. So they choose. I know that they choose timeframes that are much shorter than like the year timeframe because they need to track. Like, are we hitting milestones? Is our team, accomplishing their goal?
Right.
Are we getting feedback from people like in the industry? Are we on the right track?
Yeah. So we have a few more questions, then we're going to turn it over to live Q&A. So guys, get your questions ready, and we'll answer them live. So going to week 3, where we talked about business models. The business, you can have a product, you can have a product that actually meets a solution, but if you don't have a business, you're not going to have too much time to do what you want to do. So every product needs a business model in order for the startup to grow, scale, and survive as a company. If a founder's product can fit within multiple business models, is there a simple way to determine which model has the best fit for the product?
I like to talk about this as we've got product market fit, but we also have like business model company fit.
Yeah.
It's possible that you may have this amazing product that solves this perfect like problem that people have. But if you set up your company in the wrong way, it's possible that your company may still like run into some trouble. So keep track of like what are other business models that companies in your space or in kind of like a similar direction, what are they doing? One of the best examples in kind of the hardware domain was around the time that Dropcam came out.
Okay.
Dropcam, now Nest, built this camera that would was the first in-home kind of tracking camera, and they charged $200 for the camera, but they also charged $10 for the for storing some of your video in the cloud.
Cool. Yeah.
And at that time, it was kind of revolutionary to buy a piece of hardware and then you have to pay more money on a monthly basis to keep it going. But they figured out that the problem that they were solving was very well aligned with this business model of kind of a software subscription on a recurring basis, and that like changed things for a lot of hardware companies. You see companies like Peloton now; they practically, I think you can like get a Peloton for $0 and you just pay $90 or $100 per month.
Yeah.
So that's changed things. And so some of the best founders I know, they keep their ear to the ground, and as things are shifting, as new business models are coming up, they experiment with them. Maybe they say we're going to take 5% or 1% of our users and experiment with this new business model to see if maybe we can grow faster while shifting how people pay us. I would just keep experimenting, keep learning from other founders, And it may actually apply to your company.
Yeah.
You may have to shift.
Like innovating on the technology side is great, but also you can do some innovation on the business
Exactly.
model side
Yeah.
as well. Like if you had to innovate a bit differently on the delivery of your watch of Pebble, how would you have switched it from what you originally went with? How could you have experimented on?
I mean, we
delivery
kind of
approach?
did, right? We shifted, we mixed things up by launching on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So at the time, normally, if you wanted to buy a gadget, you would walk down to the Best Buy,
Right.
and it would be all done in a package.
Best Buy, they still around?
It's like Amazon, but
It's
in
like
person.
Okay.
And we shifted that around. We said like, hey, we're building this thing. Here's our project. What do you think?
Right.
And that really resonated with people. So that was a bit of a different setup than people had done in the past.
Yeah. Good deal. Awesome. One more question about business models, and then we'll go into questions, Q&A. So investors ultimately want to understand your business model and gain insight into the metrics that gauge whether or not the startup is going to be like $1 billion company. Ultimately, that's what they're optimizing for. How should founders use models and metrics to communicate to investors?
Oh, it's pretty simple. I mean, in general, startups, for the kind of YC definition of startups are companies that are designed to grow fast.
Okay.
Paul Graham wrote an amazing blog post called Startup Equals Growth.
Okay.
And it doesn't really matter which metric you choose, as long as it's closely linked to like revenue or usage or something that's like very close to, are you building something that people want?
Yeah.
And then you just make that number grow. Because at the end of the day, if you're building something that's not growing, kind of by definition, you're not solving a problem that people have. You're not building something that people want.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, like investors, especially at the early stage, the angel seed stage, doesn't really matter like the exact analytics. Like you don't have to follow any special rules. It's literally like, are you growing?
Yeah.
Are you continuing to grow revenues? That's the key thing that startups should focus on.
Yeah.
And
Revenues or users.
Yeah, but like most companies, if they have users, should be growing their revenue as well.
Okay.
Except there's some exceptions to that, but in general, like the things that we look at YC are like revenue as a proxy for, are you building something that people want?
Yeah.
And yeah, with the exceptions around like consumer companies and that kind of, specifically like large social apps and that kind of thing.
Right.
But we use that as a proxy to say like, how are these founders doing? Are they solving the problems that they need to solve in order to build a great company?
Cool. Awesome. So that's it for the question portion of the talk. So please stay tuned for frequently asked questions, and we will be back in less than a minute. Cool. Welcome back with Grow with Google. We're here with Eric Migicovsky from YC Partner, and we have a few questions from the live stream audience. So the first question, Eric, is there a startup where you didn't think they would find product market fit, but ultimately did anyway, so you were wrong? Why didn't you think that they would find product market fit, and why did they ultimately succeed?
I think a good example of this would be a company called Jump Bicycles. You may have heard of them. They got acquired by Uber just last year.
Yep.
But they actually started out in 2009 or 2010. They did a Kickstarter for something called Social Bicycles out in Brooklyn, out in New York. They were doing something kind of similar to what they're doing now, except I think it was, it wasn't electric bikes. It wasn't like a citywide scale. I think it was like people would build their own fleets or networks of these bicycles, and you would like rent them out. Or loan them out to each other. The interesting thing, the lesson that I learned from this story is perseverance. They definitely did not hit product market fit at the beginning. In fact, 2010 probably to 2016, 17, they didn't get it.
Oh wow!
They stayed alive. They didn't spend all their money. They kept going. And when kind of mobility space really opened up around 2016, 2017, Lime, Bird, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then they were perfectly positioned. They had the technology, they had the expertise, they had the fleet. They made some changes to their software. They changed the name, and they ended up building like this really awesome company out of it.
Cool.
Again, like I think the lesson there is you don't know exactly. Not everything's always within your control, but if you like stay alive, keep your money, don't spend it, you may be well positioned to take advantage of kind of a shift or a new trend.
Yeah, stay alive.
Yeah,
main takeaway.
That's the key.
Another question from our live stream audience. Wanted to know how much money to keep for my campaign this time of year to target Indiegogo or Kickstarters. Any inputs to make a successful crowdfunding video? Because you're successful in that. So any thoughts around that?
We launched our first campaign on Kickstarter basically with $0. We borrowed a camera from a friend of mine.
Yeah.
The interns were the other people that were in the video. Like my friends, I just went to their house and said, like, hey, could you be in this video? It's changed a little bit. Like things are a little bit flashier, showy. But in general, like you should not have to spend that much money to launch your campaign.
Okay.
I think some of the best campaigns are the ones that are honest. They're from like the heart. They're like, I had this problem, I built a solution to it. One of my favorite campaigns that I ever backed was this kid in LA who built a trike, like a big wheel bicycle trike.
Okay.
It was called a drift trike, and you'd have a little handle, and you could like do like 180s, 360s.
That's pretty cool.
And it was this like, probably 17-year-old kid in a metal shop. Clearly filmed it himself.
Yeah.
Ended up raising like a couple $100,000 on the
That's
campaign.
awesome.
I got my drift trike. It was great. And I think like, just like how I was saying before, you don't have to punch at the highest class. Like with an MVP, just get it out there. See if people want it. You don't have to spend that much money.
Yep. Another question here. How do you convey sweat equity? So that's like the work you've done behind the scenes as founders to seed stage investors. Can you monetize or get credit for that?
Raising money is hard.
Yes.
I struggled for years. Most people don't know it, but our Kickstarter campaign in 2012 was actually at the 5-year anniversary of starting the company. So there's like doing a startup, there's nothing, you don't get anything for free. Like people don't have to invest in you. Investors like aren't forced to invest in you. Really, the only way to do it is to control your own destiny.
Yeah.
To say, I don't actually need to raise money. I can do this with revenue from customers. I can do this with like, government grants. I can do this for really cheap. That's the only tried and true way of starting a company. In terms of like how you negotiate with early stage investors, it's really like the best way to do it is to not need investors. Because then you have the control. You have the best alternative to the negotiated agreement. You have the bad nut, which is to say, if you don't like the deal, I'm gonna do it without you.
Yeah.
Not everyone has the ability to raise money from investors, and I wasted years of that early 5-year period trying to talk to investors and raise money. When in reality, I should have just like spent like less money, figured out a way of getting an MVP out, selling it, getting money from customers. Looking back, like you have to be in a position of power to raise money. You have to have growth. You have to have something that causes investors to say like, wow, I'm scared not to fund this person. Like I just need to give them money because someone else is going to give it and they're going to become the next Dropbox or the next Airbnb. So you have to get people afraid. And the way that you do that is by getting validation from your customers.
Yeah, or the next Google.
Yeah.
So last question here from the live stream audience. What if your users are medium to large corporations? What's the best way to get through all the red tape and talk to the right person within the organization?
It's a funny story. I was actually talking to this, great YC founder, had like couple $100 million exit.
Okay.
He had to get a deal done with a bank. And he, asked his investors like, hey, who could I talk to at this bank? And they weren't able to give him an introduction to the right person.
Yeah.
He phoned the 1-800 number, talked to the rep.
Okay.
Talked to her manager, talked to that person's manager, worked up 8 layers in the organization, and within six weeks had closed that company.
Wow. And
got a deal with them. It was crazy, like inspirational to me to know that you can just like, you can talk your way to pretty much anything. Like that's like proof that you can talk your way to pretty much anything. Now you have to be a good talker. You have to know how to work kind of the phones. But like generally, you like more often than not, you like as a founder, you can use your network to get into a big company. Like one of the things that I like to do is if I'm looking for an introduction to say hire someone or to get a new customer within a large organization, I go to my LinkedIn, I go to my Facebook, and I literally go through every single person. Like I just scan through it, like just eyeball, and I think of like who does that person know? Where does that person work? Where did that person go to school? Is there anyone that they may know through several hops of their network? And then I just phone them up and I say like, hey, is there any chance that you can help me kind of navigate my way through this? We have larger networks than we think. Like we all, we went to school, we worked at these different companies. Like you kind of, just by virtue of being in the startup world, you have these networks. What I find is that you got to take the time to just like work your way, iterate your way through it. Yeah. And odds are, as you probably know someone who might be connected into that.
Yeah, awesome. That's it for live stream questions. We'll talk a bit about Google Cloud for Startups program here. If you are a startup and you need resources to grow, we have a ton of resources. Whether you're in the idea phase and you're still talking to users and trying to understand where the real pain is, all the way up to you found product market fit and you're ready to scale, we offer resources for you from Google Cloud, from technical resources all the way down to community resources. If you're interested in joining, you can go to our website at cloud.google.com/startups, and we have an application online where you can apply to be a part of our program. If you have capital from investors, your investors have a referral link. Ask your investor for what that referral link is, and you'll be fast-tracked through the approval process. And with that, I want to say thank you to Eric, and thank you for tuning in. Please visit Cloud OnAir for more content from Google Cloud experts. Thanks, Eric.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Otter.
Yeah.